horas que llevo hay que aguantarla.
Que vengas arraigada,
La de Dios. Yo me paso la vida en la cantina, insistiendo que así podré borrarte.
Okay, we're going to start by adding the dry ingredients. There's the white flour. Now we add the whole wheat flour, the gluten, now the baking powder, and the salt. What we're going to do this time is sift everything together to make sure that all these dry ingredients are thoroughly combined. So I'm going to use a sifter. This is prior to adding the shortening or any of the liquid ingredients. All this serves to do is to thoroughly incorporate or thoroughly mix all the dry ingredients so that there's no hot spots, you might say. Making wheat tortillas a little different than the white tortillas, because not only that the wheat is a little more difficult to work with, it's a denser wheat. Adding the gluten helps make it more pliable. You can find gluten either at your local supermarket like a Walmart, or you can order some online. I just mix all this once more, make sure it's all mixed together. Okay, you can use your hands or a whisk. Now I put all this back in my mixing bowl. Now this part was left out of the video. Add the 4 tablespoons of melted shortening at this stage, then incorporate it. Now see, it'll turn into a crumbly mixture like this here. Again, I'm not using my fingers in this case, I'm using the whisk. That's because I want these crumbs to be a lot finer than I could maybe do with just my fingers. I'm beginning to add the water now, and as we move along I'll be incorporating that water with the dry ingredients. Some people use that pastry tool that will get right through this, but I just use my hands. Turn it onto a floured surface. Wheat flour, the masa is a lot more dense than your all-purpose white flour tortillas, so this is a little bit harder to knead. You're going to need some water, which will make sure that your dough stays as flexible as possible. So here I'm just dipping my fingers and rubbing my hands with the water. This makes the dough a little slicker, and of course the flour on the surface is going to be picked up, and so the dough is going to keep returning to the consistency of its density, but I'll just keep using water for now. Okay, so I've rolled it out, and this has to continue a lot longer than when you're making white flour tortillas. In this case, 8 to 10 minutes maybe. You do want this to be a lot more flexible. Uh, Now, I have some residue of the oil left. I rub my hands with the oil. This helps the kneading process. Okay, and this is going to be rolled until it's quite flexible and silky. You could let this work in two ways. You can let the ball of dough set and then roll it out into balls, and then let the balls set and rest a little longer as well. Again, I just save that step. I just roll them right into balls, and with wheat flour, you need to definitely let the dough rest at least 30 minutes. I let these rest an hour and a half to 2 hours. White flour tortillas, you can make do with 15 minutes minimum, and I generally let those rest for an hour. But here, uh, this density of this dough, what I do is I want to make sure that the uh, gluten in it, as well as the baking powder, uh, activates for a little bit longer period of time. If you don't, when you're baking it, the tortilla will still feel just about the same in density, but you're not going to see any bubbling going on your comal. Not until maybe half a dozen tortillas later. I roll the ball, I tuck it under. You don't have to tuck it under. You want to start out with as much as a round dough as you possibly can. Cover the up with plastic and let it rest for at least 30 minutes, and I suggest definitely an hour to 2 hours. This makes for a fluffier tortilla. Not so heavy, not so dense. Flour your surface. You're going to see, just watching the video, how different the texture is of this wheat masa compared to the white flour masa if you've seen the previous video on white flour tortillas. The gluten that's in the tortilla, it has not totally worked its way in. So the tortilla seems to roll out more like clay and less like the pliable dough that you look for in white flour tortillas. Don't fear, it'll be okay. As long as you let that masa rest for a good enough time, you'll have the fluffiness that you're looking for. Even though the tortilla will appear to be dense and heavy compared to white flour tortillas, this will still work fine, considering if you let the masa rest for a good enough period of time. Make sure your comal was heated at least 10-15 minutes before you started. And notice that it's taking me a little bit more to roll this out than the white flour tortilla. And if you want it round, you have to find the places where it's not going round. It's because the dough ball is being rolled out in a greater circumference, a bigger diameter. See how thin that is? Okay, maybe you can hear the tortilla sizzling slightly. That's because of the oil that's in it, and the oil that I rubbed on my hands when I made the tortilla masa balls. See the bubbles starting to pop up, and that's a good sign. That's the first tortilla. So that means that the other dough balls have achieved enough of that consistency. Wheat flour tortillas, I like to put them in a plastic bag rather than just a cloth to let them continue to steam. This keeps them soft and pliable in the beginning here. Later on, you can also put them in a little bucket. Okay, coming up, episode 3 is going to have those low-fat tortillas. Episode 4, homemade corn tortillas. So please come back and visit.